Hello, you awesome art parents. All right, so we're into March, and this is the month that we do our canvas boards. And it's definitely a project that I'm excited for. It's a big one for the kids. They love doing these, and I feel like it's important that every classroom gets them. So if you're not able to make it into your classroom, please let me know. But please try and get in early, make it a point to make it in there. Because it's an important project for the kids. A lot of kids don't get to do canvases at home. And we'll talk really quick about our awesome artist for the month. This is Vincent Van Gogh, and you're supposed to say it Van Gogh. That's how he says it. Nobody in America says it that way, so I don't know. Do what you want to do. But you can see an amazing artist who had an incredibly sad life. This poor guy was never really acknowledged during his life. He did have mild, tepid success during his later years, but actually only sold one painting while he was alive. Also, though, his career was only 10 years long. And during that time, he painted over 2,100 works of art, which is incredible. I mean, that's just such a vast amount for such a short career, right? So he had a lot of mental problems, right? Looking back, academics have been able to kind of piece together from journals, from his letters to Theo, that he probably had schizophrenia, epilepsy, definitely severe depression, and then there are a few other possible diseases, like a blood disease that they think that he might have had that can affect you mentally also. So man, a guy who had to overcome a lot of stumbling blocks and ultimately, honestly, didn't very well, but still was able to have this amazing, vibrant career. So he was kind of a quiet child. Oh, autism. They think he was probably autistic. Quiet child. There are letters from his mom that say he was kind of withdrawn, kind of hard, hard to deal with, hard to love, didn't like to be touched, which sounds like autism, right? Kind of interesting. Had several different career attempts. He was a miner at one point. He really wanted to go into ministry. He wanted to become a Methodist minister, but wasn't able, and he worked as a missionary for a little while and then was let go, and then also didn't pass his entrance exams to get into school. And finally, his brother Theo, he's very close with, said, "Hey, why don't you come to Paris? Come live with me. You really should pursue art." Theo knew this because he was an art dealer. There were several art dealers in the family, and so he was a great support to Vincent. And we know so much about Vincent Van Gogh because he wrote over 600 letters to Theo. And Theo wrote him back, but he didn't keep all of the letters, whereas Theo kept all of the letters together in a box. So we have all this, almost like a diary preserved, which is really amazing and awesome. Okay, so he moves in with Theo in Paris, and these he describes as the happiest 2 years of his life. He meets several amazing artists. He meets Seurat and a lot of the pointillists. And we talked about Seurat last year, remember, with the little dots of paint that when you put them together form this cohesive, awesome picture. So here is an example of his early work. Very, lots of earth tones, very muted tones. He doesn't have that interesting brushwork that he's famous for, right? And then he hangs out with the Impressionists and the Pointillists and develops his own style that really is completely unique. And I think it's important to point out to the students and look at there's so many different colors in each little section here. Look at the mountains in the back have blues and purples and golds, and then you've got blues and greens, and then up here in the front, in the foreground where we want to put, most of the detail, what's close, that's where we show more of the detail, right? And look at all the colors there. It's really amazing. I'm really an amazing artist. And amazing that in this short career, he produces so much and so many influential works. and he has such a hard time. I mean, he has such a hard life, and he doesn't help by his life choices, right? He goes in, so through those letters to Theo, we learn that he'll go for days without eating, just drinking and smoking. That's not going to do good things for your health. He has a hard time sleeping, so he doesn't get much sleep. And he just wasn't, the poor guy just wasn't healthy. But amazing work. So he decides to leave Paris. He says he's exhausted by like the frenetic pace and the art scene. And Paris in the 1880s really is, like, it was the golden age of art. It is the epicenter of art for the world at that time. And so he moves to southern France and starts what he hopes will be an artist colony. And he convinces Gauguin to come with him. Now, Gauguin, just not a good guy. Great artist, not a good guy. Super, like, domineering, very arrogant, very self-centered. These two big personalities together have this huge, super intense friendship, and they're living together, and they're in southern France where it's kind of countryside, there's not as much to do, and you can see how things might get a little crazy. And that's what leads up to his famous altercation where they have a fight and he takes a razor and shaves off part of his ear, and, you know, cuts off part of his ear. And the accounts are really varied. Gauguin definitely paints it in his favor. Van Gogh doesn't remember it when he wakes up 2 days later, although he did send the ear to a prostitute that they both visited. So maybe not something to really share with the kids, but just, I mean, you know, they feel like he had an acute breakdown. So he ends up in the hospital, checked into a mental hospital after he recovers enough, and spends the last year of his life in a couple of different mental hospitals. And actually, this is where he does just a prolific amount of work. Part of the things that he do, I mean, keep in mind, he's committed, so he can't, like, get out and go see the countryside to paint, right? So part of the things he does is he takes other famous paintings and does his own version. So we have all these paintings that are his version of different famous works, and then lots of portraits of his doctor, portraits of other patients, and portraits. Let's see, I have a countryside that he could see from his room in here that I can show you. Oh, that's this one. So just, I mean, you know, this last year of amazing work, and ultimately, just mentally can't make it. So he ends up shooting himself and then later dying from an infection from the gunshot wound. And so just, I mean, man, such a sad life, but also such a remarkable example of someone, you know, battling against really severe odds and making really amazing, beautiful things. Right? Just, I mean, really a remarkable person. I put in one of his preliminary sketches just so you could see, just the quality. Sometimes with his painting style, you kind of lose the, like, the crisp details, but he was an amazing, amazing artist. Okay, so today we are going to do our own Van Gogh style painting, I want you to just encourage the kids to, you can see I just super lightly, I even drew a little bit darker than I would if this were just something I was making for myself. But just so you can see. But super lightly, we're going to outline what we're working on here. And then the kind of cool thing about this is that you're working alla prima or directly, which just means normally with painting, you kind of build up layers. You start at the background and work to the foreground. But with this, we're kind of just working like all flat. We're doing it all at once. So we're going to go in, and I'm going to, you know, heavy use of the paint, and just start using like swift, bold strokes. And as I go, I can kind of mix things along and make it more interesting. And you'll notice I'm picking up other colors with my brush. I'm not even taking time to rinse my brush in between. I'm just kind of going back and forth and going for it. And see how by keeping those strokes really short and small and mixing in as much as I want to, you want to be careful not to overwork it, because if you do, it's just going to blur everything together and make it muddy. So, for now, I'm going to stop right about here with my tree. I feel like I've kind of got it where I want it. And then I'm going to let that just have a minute while I work on another area. And then I can go back in and kind of take, my brown, or maybe even like a dark purple would be kind of cool here, and kind of firm up my edges, because one of the hard things with this style of painting is that things can get, your edges don't stay very crisp. So I can take smaller strokes around those edges and kind of firm it up a little bit, get my shape more to where I want it to be, and then move on to another area. Oops. So it's a fun style of painting, really fun to experiment with, right? It'll be a fun activity for the kids. Just a reminder, so I would recommend doing a cup and a palette for every 2 kids. Just have kids share, because they never use as much paint as they think they will. There's so much waste when we do canvases. So just say, I'm gonna give you lots of colors to choose from, but I'm just going to put a little bit on each plate. You'll have small plates. I just didn't have one at home to use. I'm just going to put a little bit on each plate, and if you want more, you can definitely have more, but we just end up throwing away a lot of paint, so let's start out small. And usually the kids are pretty, they're fine to work with that. They'll let you know when they need more. And that's what you kind of end up doing towards the end of the lesson, is running around and squirting more paint for people who need it. And what I'll usually do is just say, I'm coming around with red, yellow, white. Who needs that? Raise your hand. And, and you go around. It's not too hard to manage. But we just want to minimize the waste if we can, because, of course, we're always dealing with our kind of small budget. It's great. It's perfect for what we're doing. But, we just want to be aware. So if you have any questions, if you need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. And please make sure you get in this month. I know sometimes in the spring we get a little crazy. And I definitely try and make our later lessons ones that aren't the end of the world if you miss. But this is one you definitely want the kids to take home. Thanks so much for all you do, parents.